talking about one of my personal favorite things, which is the Roaring 20s, because it's a huge, massive party for like 10 years, and then it leads us directly into the Great Depression. So, I can't get sick, guys. So, here's what you need to know. The Roaring 20s, if you will star the Roaring 20s. The Roaring 20s is overall described as a period of economic prosperity and cultural change, and there's a whole bunch of them. And they're a lot of fun to talk about. So the 1920s. So Roaring 20s, something you need to know. Now, the major reason of why this gets created, so if you want to put next to Harding's normalcy, you can put that as the HC. Harding is the president after World War I, and he basically says that people don't want to think about war anymore. They want to return to a new kind of normal, free from war and reform. This is why the Roaring 20 begins. People want to be able to expand and start to do things that are not just war and have a little bit of fun. So to be able to describe this a little bit, I want to kind of show you this video, which is actually a predictor of what life would be like in the year 2010. So let's see if this is how your life was like. And it kind of shows how the Roaring 20s begins this massive consumerism, excitement time, and people began to predict that the world would be a much different place because of the 1920s. So I want you to identify if any of these things are what life is like today.
Designers in the U.S. today have been asked to forecast what Eve will look like in AD 2000. One idea is a dress that can be adapted for morning, afternoon, or evening. It's the sleeves what does it. Apparently in AD 2000 we shall be having a hair-raising time. Yet another designer goes so far as to believe that skirts will disappear entirely. Shoes will have cantilever heels, and an electric belt will adapt the body to climatic changes. The lightly clad woman of tomorrow, ooh, swish, will move in an atmosphere that's scientifically kept at the right temperature. The future bride in a wedding dress of glass. What the groom will wear, apart from a worried look, isn't mentioned. A dress of aluminium, with a sash to change it for afternoon or evening, and an electric headlight to help her to find an honest man. As for him, if he matters at all, he'll be fitted with a telephone, a radio, and containers for coins, keys, and candy for cuties. No?
Okay, so what were some of the inventions it said we would have today?
Headlamp.
Okay, so by the way, it talked about the headlamp. Do you guys remember what it said the headlamp does? It said in there you can find an honest man. So what do you think it does? It lights up if somebody's lying. It's a lie detector. Okay? What else did they say we'd have by the 2000s?
We'd not have skirts anymore.
Yeah, we'd not have skirts anymore. And then did you hear what it said the belt does?
Oh, yeah.
It changes our atmosphere. So there's no coats anymore. There's no shorts. Your atmosphere around you changes based on the climate. Okay? The wedding dress, what was the wedding dress made out of? Glass. Okay? And then you could see they had the hair raising good times. And then the guy, what did the guy have on his body? That was a phone. Did you guys see that? He had a phone. You guys notice that? Anybody, no? Some of you? Maybe? You guys see that? He has a phone that's attached to him constantly. So it's a cell phone. But it's one that's connected by a wire to your body. And then you can see he had places for cash, coins, and cuties, okay, and candies. So all of these were predictions in the 1920s. And the 1920s really began this period of like massive technological change where people believed that anything was possible. So one example of that is the radio. And the radio is basically the first major thing that can communicate things. Now, to understand the impact of the radio, we have to realize how would a radio be so different compared to in today's world. So I want to give you an example really quickly. And actually, I'm going to do something. Hold on, I got to find it. I just changed my mind about how I want to teach this. 1 second. It's going to take a moment to do this. Talk amongst yourselves for half a second because I'm going to change this really fast. I changed my mind. Okay, sorry. Okay, so I've decided I'm going to do this a little bit differently, so I apologize that we're kind of going in and out. So here's what I want you to do. We are going to compare how radio was back then to how it is today and why radio had to be a certain way at this time. So I'm going to play you a clip, a sound clip, and I want you to see if you can identify to me what is happening in this clip. Okay? So, see if you can identify what is happening in this clip.
This morning, it looked as though they were not going to be able to get off.
115 seconds, velocity 2,900 feet per second, altitude 9 nautical miles, downrange distance 7 nautical miles.
So something major just barely happened. Can anybody raise their hand if they think they know what happened? Okay, we'll start over there. What do you think happened?
Boat crash.
A boat crash, possibly? What do you think happened?
Either like a plane or a space shuttle or something.
A plane or a space shuttle or something like that? Were they very descriptive of what was going on? No, they weren't very descriptive at all. So what you're actually seeing is one of the worst disasters in American history, which is the Space Shuttle Columbia explosion that happened in the 80s. Now we're going to watch this again, but now we're going to watch it with the video. And I want you to think, what is the problem with how the announcer is doing this, or what is he relying on?
T-minus 21 seconds. The solid rocket booster engine gimbal now underway.
So the 25th Space Shuttle mission is now on the way after more delays than NASA cares to count. This morning, it looked as though they were not going to be able to get off.
115 seconds, velocity 2,900 feet per second, altitude 9 nautical miles, downrange distance 7 nautical miles.
So what you just saw is the Space Shuttle Columbia disaster. And I want to point out, why didn't he actively describe what was going on in the scene? Why do you think? Yeah.
Because he expected people to be able to see what was going on.
Yeah, you can see it, right? You don't have to be explained of what is going on in this. And by the way, I just want to point out one thing about this event. Your parents probably remember this event very well. The reason why is because one of the women, who is this woman right here, was a science teacher, a 5th grade science teacher. So they did a new program where they were going to have a teacher go onto the ship. So she went up, and to be able to expand on this, they ended up having everybody in the whole United States watch this live in their classrooms. So everybody was watching the video live when this happened, and then all the teachers shut it off because obviously you can see what happened. But now we're going to compare this now to the radio of the 20s. So how would you describe this differently? So we're going to compare this to the Hindenburg. So as you know with the Hindenburg was a massive blimp that it was made of extremely flammable material. It was made of an extremely flammable gas, and it explodes. And I want you to compare what we just saw to this. So how are the broadcasts differently when we watch this?
Only just enough to keep it from. It's right to the plane. Get it started. It's right, and it's rising. It's rising terrible. Oh my, get out of the way, please. It's burning, bursting in the planes, and it's falling on the morning fast, and all the folks agree that this is terrible. This is one of the worst catastrophes in the world. Oh, it's...
What was different about how he described that event? Yeah, what do you think, Mariana?
Well, he was describing it really vividly, like he was narrating a story.
Yeah, exactly. So you had to describe it very, very vividly to be able to describe what was going on. So since you guys are a little bit ahead, I'm going to show you a video that the other classes aren't going to see, which is a funny video. And it's going to kind of show you why they had to be so different when it came to the radio. And this is Studio C, so some of you might have seen this if you're a Studio C fan. But I want you to think, how did they have to do radio back then to be able to show people the stories? We just started.
All right, folks, we're just tickled to have you in the live audience for our radio mystery hour tonight. But remember, keep your own noise to a minimum, because if you talk, the sound will be picked up in the live broadcast tonight, and we want the only sounds to come from our actors here on stage and our sound technician, Mallory, there in the back. Ain't she a doll? Yes, sirree. Okay, she's done now. All right, folks, enjoy the show. Stay tuned. We're going live in 5, 4, 3.
And now Radio Mystery Hour presents part 2 of the haunting story, The Next Door Neighbors, sponsored by...
Campbell's Soup. You know you want a cup, so make your wife warm one up. Da-da-da.
In the old abandoned house, Rex stood at the window and Sheila huddled in the corner, terrified.
Please don't
Outside,
text.
The rain fell loudly. The wind raged, and the thunder clapped.
Oh, Rex, I'm so frightened. I don't believe we're going to make it out of here.
He walked to her.
Look at me, dollface. We'll make it out, I swear.
He leaned in to kiss her for the first time, but then a knock at the door. Rex and Sheila froze. Then the door creaked open. Rex started walking toward the door.
Oh, Rex, do be careful.
I will, Sheila.
He pushed the door open and there was nothing there. All he heard was this song in the wind. Rex slammed the door and then all was white.
What was that, Rex?
It was just a song, Sheila, with a lot of odd percussion at the end.
They listened again, but all they heard was the whistling of the wind. Rex was so nervous he could hear the sound of his own heartbeat.
Rex, you're trembling.
Sheila walked over to Rex.
You're a classy broad, Sheila.
But right at that moment, there were 3 more knocks at the door, and it started to creak open again. And once again, that eerie tune. They were mystified by the song. Rex snapped out of it and slammed the door again and locked it.
Slam! Lock it, it's locked.
Don't want to know what that was.
Me neither, Rex.
All they could hear was the babbling brook outside the house. Then suddenly the unimaginable happened. A masked man sitting on an elephant burst into the room, causing the entire side of the house to crumble.
Oh, the children aren't safe.
The elephant let out a cry, and the baby elephant ran in and cried back.
I think everybody's had it.
The man shot a BB gun and the bullet shattered the window, then ricocheted off a pot, then a lamp, then a chair, then a beam, then the lamp again, and then landed on top of the stairs, and it rolled all the way down the stairs faster and faster until it dropped into a cup of water.
All right, so how did they have to show people what life was like on the radios? Like, what did they have to do? So they have to do a walkthrough, and do you see how descriptive they have to be? Because you have to make the picture in your head, which is how the radio was back at that time. So, it's being annoying. So from there, you also have the movies. Now, in particular, if you will star, the silent movies are the most likely one that you'll see on the AP exam. So the silent movies is what begins this different thing. And basically, the entire goal of the silent movie is to be able to describe something to you without words. Now, the most famous out of all of these actors is who? Charlie Chaplin, because Charlie Chaplin's obviously the most famous. And he has a very distinctive part of his look that everybody knows him for. And what's that? The mustache, which is similar to Adolf Hitler. Now, Charlie Chaplin had the mustache first. Adolf Hitler did say that he was a huge fan of Charlie Chaplin, and that is part of the reason why he did it. Charlie Chaplin actually shaved off his mustache in World War II. And fun fact, Charlie Chaplin was Jewish. I don't know if Hitler knew that. Okay? But interesting factoid. So to be able to learn a little bit more about Charlie Chaplin in the silent movie, we are going to watch my favorite of all of his silent movies. Now, one thing about this movie I just want to point out to you is notice things about how he's portraying himself to be able to convince you of this story in the silent film. Okay, so when you first think of silent movies, you're like, how the heck am I supposed to enjoy something where nobody talks? What were some of the techniques that he used to be able to get his point across without saying any words?
Hands.
Hands, what else? Facial expressions. What about the music? Did the music match? Yeah, exactly. So all of these were techniques, and Charlie Chaplin became extremely famous through the use of these techniques. However, it now changes through what is called the talkies, and if you will highlight the talkies are going to specifically be movies that talk. That's what they are referred to as. Well, the talkies start with a show called The Jazz Singer, and you need to star The Jazz Singer. It is commonly on the AP exam. The Jazz Singer is the very first talking movie that is synchronized with sound. But there's something very interesting about this. So obviously The Jazz Singer is about jazz music, which traditionally is an African-American based music. Well, the thing is, at this time, are African-Americans discriminated against? Yes, so is an African-American going to be the lead? No way. So instead, they use blackface. So what happens is that the head of this movie, the entire movie is about an African-American jazz singer who is becoming great, but they use somebody who's white. And so you'll see, this is where you get the stereotype that people who are black have lighter hands. That's why he's wearing white gloves. Or you can see the big puffed up mouth. Now, I'm going to show you a clip from this, and I just want you to point out, everybody thought he was black. This won the Academy Award, and it took 20 years for somebody to realize he wasn't actually black in this movie. We're not going to go into this more, but do you guys see how, like, it's interesting how our cultural things, like, we obviously see that this is, like, really definitely not somebody who's black, and it's using blackface, but it was very acceptable. That's why blackface has become so controversial in the past. I was actually just reading about Ariana Grande and how she is getting a lot of hate for a magazine cover that she did over the weekend, considering if it's possibly blackface that she used. So really interesting to see the difference. Now, to show you kind of the impact of all of these talkies, though, and how it impacted the movie industry, I want to refer to a great movie called Singing in the Rain. Has anybody ever at least seen a clip from this movie or heard a song? Singing in the Rain, I'm singing in the rain. That's a really famous one, right? Now, let me give you some background of what Singing in the Rain, though, is all about. So Singing in the Rain is an entire movie about basically this girl who is, and sorry, the Google Slides has been having issues with videos lately. It's about this lady named Lena Lamont, and she is a silent movie star, but now the talkies are there, and she has to adapt, but there's a problem. Lena Lamont is really, really bad at being a talkie movie star. So I want you to see this clip to kind of see the transition of technology of what happened with these silent movie stars and why they couldn't adapt.
All right, here we go. Quiet, quiet, roll up.
Gotta talk into the mic. I can't pick it up.
Cut! What's the matter, Dexter?
Meantime, look, don't you remember I told you there's a microphone right there in the bush?
Yeah,
You have to talk into.
I was talking. Wasn't I, Miss Dinsmore?
Yes, my dear, but please remember round tones. Pierre, you shouldn't have come.
Pierre, you shouldn't have come.
Yes, my dear, that's much better now.
Hold it a second.
Lena, look, here's the mic, right here in the bush.
Yeah.
Now you talk to it. The sound goes through the cable to the box. A man records it on a big record in wax. But you have to talk into the mic first, in the bush. Now try it again.
She is dumb.
She'll get it, Dexter. Look, Lena, don't worry. We're all a little nervous the first day. Everything's going to be okay. Oh, by the way, Roscoe, you know the scene coming up where I say Imperious Princess of the Night? I don't like those lines there. Is it all right if I just say what I always do? I love you, I love you, I love you.
Sure, any way it's comfortable. But into the bush! Okay, again. Quiet! Roll 'em!
Okay, so you guys see the issues that she had in the transition of technology. So while technology expanded in the 1920s, it also was really hard for some people to adapt, especially some of these stars. So imagine like our huge stars today that basically overnight become completely out of a job, because you could see she has an uncomfortable voice, she can't figure out how to speak into the microphone, all these various problems. Now, if you watch the movie, you know how the movie ends. Basically, what happens is, to combat this, they end up having a dub over. So while she is speaking, she has the girl on the right speak for her. And then I'm not going to tell you the ending, but you can go watch the movie for yourself. Figure it out. But we are not going to watch it because we're going to keep going. Now, another thing, too, though, is here's a little piece of Disney history for you. This is also going to be the very first animated film with synchronized sound. And that film is called what? Steamboat Willie, which is the first full-length film, which is 12 minutes long. That was considered a full-length film in the 1920s and 30s. So Steamboat Willie becomes famous, but Mickey Mouse was not the original star of the show. Does anybody know what actually they thought the star of Steamboat Willie was going to be? Not the steamboat. It's actually Pete. So if you've seen a Goofy movie, you know who Pete is. Pete was the star of this. He was the captain of the boat, and they thought he was going to be the big star, but it ended up being Mickey Mouse. It wasn't Mickey Mouse's first appearance, though, in the Disney film. Does anybody know what the first movie was with Mickey Mouse? Here's all your Disney trivia. Had to do with an airplane. It was called Plane Crazy, so now you can use that on a trivia contest. And his original name was not Mickey Mouse in the film. This one's an easy one. What was his original name? It was Mortimer. It was Mortimer Mouse. And his wife said that was too ugly of a name, and so they changed it to Mickey Mouse. And the original voices of Mickey and Minnie Mouse were Walt Disney and his wife Lily. And they were the voices of Mickey Mouse until 1960. So, yep, there you go. Fun fact. So, let's bring us to all of these things. You have radio, you have movies, and now you get celebrities. Now, as I talked about before, we are obsessed with celebrities, right? You go through and you get notifications about celebrities. You follow them on Instagram, all these different things. We are obsessed with celebrities, and it begins in the 1920s. So this is where you get it. It's its own key concept. It's specifically about the rise of celebrity status and the rise of famous people. So I want to give you some examples of some famous people during the time period. Probably the most famous sports athlete is going to be Babe Ruth. And people became obsessed with Babe Ruth and his success. Now, Babe Ruth played for the Yankees, and he becomes extremely famous, especially as a home run hitter. His most famous incident is, if you've ever seen The Sandlot, is during the World Series. He had 2 strikes on him. He famously points out to the position in the outfield and says, "That's where I'm going to hit the ball." And then he hits it exactly where that was. and gets the home run and ends up winning the game and breaks the home run record. And that's probably his most famous event. Another fun fact about Babe Ruth as well, he has a candy bar named after him called Baby Ruth. And if you want another Disney fact, Walt Disney, to figure out how much of the distance between trash cans he would need to have, he got a box of 100 candy bars, and in 24 hours, he would eat the Baby Ruth candy bar because it was his favorite. And then as soon as he was done, he would drop it on the ground while walking. And then he would eat another one, and then he averaged the distance between the time it took him to eat each of the candy bars, and that's how far of a distance there is between trash cans at Disneyland. And it's the reason why is because that's how they prevent trash, is they have so many trash cans. And there's a guy in Colorado that his only job is he makes the trash cans for the park by hand. So every trash can is handmade by a guy in Colorado. And he makes like $200,000 a year for doing it, and he's like 80 years old. Now you know. Disney trivia. Well, the thing is, though, is Babe Ruth also becomes a massive celebrity. So people started constantly writing papers about it. So you can see Babe Ruth and Mrs. Babe all mixed up on Baby's birthday. This was all about how his son, they had a party, and the location was mixed up on the invitation, so people went to the wrong place. And this was front page news. Okay? Everybody started to become obsessed with celebrities. And when he died, it was very similar to like the events that just happened in LA this week with Kobe Bryant. Is basically what happened is they had this massive funeral where 20,000 people showed up at his funeral to be able to watch. Now that brings us though to a little bit of tragedy. What happens as a celebrity if it's such a big celebrity that something bad happens to you? So this is Charles Lindbergh. Anybody know what he becomes famous for?
He was a really great pilot.
He was a pilot. And he's the first pilot to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. So he flew from New York to Paris in 14 hours. He flew by himself, and to get across without running out of gas, he eliminated everything that was non-essential in the plane. So he took away the radio, the navigation system, the toilet, everything was gone. So he could be able to make this flight across, and it made him very famous. He was actually one of the biggest celebrities, so like our Beyoncés and stuff. That was Charles Lindbergh. People like printed his picture out and put it on their walls as like their celebrity crush. Everybody was obsessed with this pilot. Unfortunately for him, though, his celebrity status has a very sad ending, and it has to do with his baby, which was named Charles after him. You see, his baby was a massive celebrity. Everybody wanted pictures of him. Shortly after his first birthday, his mom puts him down for bed, goes to check on him at 3 a.m., and the baby is gone. The window is open. Little breeze is coming through, and Charles Lindbergh's baby has been kidnapped. Now, the thing is, back then, they did not have very good investigative techniques, so unfortunately, they basically issued this call over the radio. Reporters are sitting outside. They want the scoop. They go into the room. There is no, like, blocking people like it is today with, like, crime scene tape. People go in. They take artifacts from his room to be able to sell. They basically ruin all forensic evidence that was in the room. And Charles Lindbergh's baby is gone. Well, the thing is that this becomes the massive worldwide news. This is like the Elizabeth Smart of the time period of people trying to find this. 3 days later, Charles Lindbergh receives a letter. It's one of those cut out where they cut out the letters from the newspaper. They gave it to him and they said, if you give us $300,000 in cash, we will give you back Charles Lindbergh. Well, the thing about that is that that amount is about $10 million in today's money. But Charles Lindbergh has that money. He puts it in a briefcase. He goes to the drop-off spot. He drops off the briefcase. He goes to where the letter says to pick up his son. His son is not there. 30 days later, a woman is walking in a park in New York and finds the body of Charles Lindbergh's baby. Now, when they did the autopsy, they discovered, though, that it appears that based on the rigor mortis and how long the baby had been there, the baby never left that room alive. What they believe happened is as the kidnapper was bringing the baby out of the window onto the fire escape, they more than likely dropped the baby. The baby's head got hit. It died of a massive brain hemorrhage and never left that room. Now, they have never found the kidnappers. They had marked bills. So every bill that Charles Lindbergh gave them, every number has a serial code, which is how you can track bills in the system. They have only ever found 6 of those bills in the last 100 years since Charles Lindbergh's baby was found. They were found at random times. The most recent one is one of the bills was found. It was used at like a Walmart in the 80s. And they have no idea who stole Charles Lindbergh's baby. So while celebrity status can be a really big thing, it can also be really negative as seen with Charles Lindbergh. So let's go from that to a topic that everybody loves to talk about, which is alcohol and prohibition. Now, this is a double-star term. You really need to know the banning of alcohol in the United States. And that brings us to the Prohibition era. So prohibition is the banning of the sale, manufacture, and consumption of alcohol. If you will start the second bullet of the reasoning, this is why we banned alcohol. Morality, it was very unpatriotic, and temperance groups began to influence it. If you haven't written your DBQ yet, all of this is stuff that you can use on the exam because all of this is in 1920. So, prohibition laws that you need to know. 18th Amendment, star it. 21st Amendment, star it. Those are two of the amendments that are must-know amendments. They are also progressive era amendments. Now, here's the best way to be able to remember the difference because I always have people struggle with remembering these amendments. At 18 years old, you can't drink alcohol. At 21, you can. The 18th Amendment bans the sale of alcohol, therefore you cannot drink. The 21st Amendment repeals it, and now you can drink again. That's the easiest way to be able to remember it between the two. Yeah?
Why was it considered unpatriotic?
So think about the military today. You can't drink on base. So even up until today, as a member of the U.S. military, you can't drink on base unless it's in your private residence, such as if you have a home on base. Additionally, think of as well as how we view alcohol. So a lot of people, for example, if they get drunk in public, they can be dismissed from the U.S. military because of the way the military is. The Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, to be able to be a guard at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Washington, D.C., you actually make a commitment to never drink again for the rest of your life or smoke. And if you break that law or break that rule, you lose your status as a member of the guard or as a previous guard. There's actually a pin that you receive, and you wear that pin very proudly and only 500 people have it. And if you ever drink just a single drop, you have to give it back. So it's seen as unpatriotic. And the other thing is, too, alcohol is typically made from like apples at this time period and things that you could use in the war effort. Remember rationing? Why are you going to go waste that when you have people dying off in the war and you can send that to them instead? So it's seen as unpatriotic in World War I. So, prohibition laws, we ban it. Volstead, you may see that. Volstead is basically what enforced the law. But let's talk about alcohol, because who doesn't love talking about alcohol? So basically, as we talked about before, they get rid of it through all of these temperance techniques and attempts to get rid of alcohol in America. Now, consequence to prohibition, this is what you need to star. You need to know it was a complete and total failure. Prohibition was one of the worst laws that we ever did because it was such a failure. So let's talk about why it was such a failure. So let's start with the speakeasy. So first, they're going to ban any bars and saloons in America. Well, instead you got these things called speakeasies. And speakeasies where you could go and illegally drink alcohol. So to show you the effect of speakeasies, I want to give you a statistic. Prior to Prohibition, so prior to the 18th Amendment, there were 15,000 bars in New York. After the passage of the 21st, it goes up to 33,000 within 6 years. So it more than doubles the amount of alcohol bars going on in New York. So alcohol consumption actually skyrockets due to Prohibition. Also, there were all these stories. So if you know of speakeasies, these are in the movies, the ones where you knock 3 times and it says password and you have to get in. People would go to speakeasies and the chief of police would be in there. Or the governor. And really famously, Warren G. Harding and Calvin Coolidge, the presidents during this time, were very famous for having a secret alcohol bar in the White House. Okay? Nobody listened to the rules. Now, additionally, another example is moonshine. Now, there are certain life lessons that you're going to learn in this class. One of these life lessons is to never, ever, ever consume moonshine. Okay? Now, it is illegal in the state of Utah. Some states do allow moonshine to be created. It is not in Utah, and it's very dangerous to create moonshine, and I'll explain why. So moonshine is illegally created alcohol. And what they would do is I like to make it similar to illegal marijuana grows today. It would be out in the middle of the woods. It would be hidden. People would do different techniques. So, for example, to be able to prevent people from knowing where it was, they would put this on the bottom of their foot and walk around it to make it look like there were cows near this barn. And it was just cows going there. But it was actually people going to make moonshine. Additionally, the dangers of moonshine. People would use old car radiators to create moonshine or things that were toxic. And they would create this moonshine and sell it. But here's the problem with moonshine. Moonshine is very specific with how you create it. Now, I personally do not drink alcohol. So if I get these statistics wrong, I apologize because I don't participate in that. But here's what I can tell you based on what I know. So, beer is traditionally 8% alcohol content. Vodka, which is a little bit more intense, quite a bit more intense, is about 45% alcohol content. Moonshine is 80% alcohol, okay? It is extremely toxic. So shots of vodka, typically you take 1 or 2 shots if you just want to be like normal, and those are really small, it's like this big. If you want to get like really crazy, you take like 8 or 9, and that makes you typically over the limit. Moonshine is one vodka thing, puts you traditionally over the limit of 0.5% in Utah or 0.8% in most other places. It is extremely toxic. Now, here's the other problem with moonshine, though, especially with teenagers your age. Do most people who consume alcohol at your age take a single sip and say, I'm done? No. So what happens is kids start to drink moonshine, and then they get really, really, really drunk, and they get alcohol poisoning. Additionally, moonshine also has another problem. Because it's using all of these things, lead gets into it as well. So you consume lead, and one of the biggest issues with moonshine is people go blind. Or people end up having liver failure because they're drinking this moonshine. Now, why do I say this to you guys? Once upon a time, there was a school. And this school was learning about the 1920s. And some kids at that school decided that they were going to actively participate in history and relate it to their lives. And they decided to make moonshine. Now, I'm not going to tell you how they made it or how they snuck it into the school. But they brought moonshine for about 300 junior students. And the teachers didn't know, and I'm not going to tell you how they got away with it because I'm not going to tell you how to sneak alcohol into the school, okay? But all of a sudden, kids started to get sick. Over half of the junior class got hospitalized. 3 students went blind because they incorrectly made the moonshine. So, this event was about 5 years ago, 5-6 years ago.
Here?
It's on the East Coast. But at my last school, not my last school, my 2 last schools ago, I had a similar incident where I taught the 1920s, and I got pulled into the principal's office because apparently my students were so excited about history that they participated in it, and parents were having problems that kids were trying to brew moonshine at home. Please don't do that. That's how I go viral for bad things, okay? Please don't make moonshine. It's also illegal. Now you've learned a life lesson, correct? Good. Thank you very much. Yes.
Wasn't there like
Let's
some
make
show
some
about
shine
moonshine?
I wouldn't be surprised. So Utah, you can home brew beer, but the problem is the alcohol content of moonshine is so high that it's too dangerous. Some states do allow moonshine to be created, especially southern states. So if you go into like Tennessee area, Missouri area, those ones do, I don't know about Missouri, but I know Tennessee allows moonshine. Okay. Now another problem is bootleggers. So bootleggers are going to be people that illegally transport alcohol. And the problem is that similar to cartels today, people start to get into organized crime to be able to transport this. So this leads to the direct creation of organized crime, and in particular, the mob and the mafia. Now, the mob and the mafia are the exact same thing. The only difference is, in order to be able to be in the mafia, you must have Sicilian and Italian heritage. So that is the major difference. Now, some of these families, such as the Gambino family, still exist today. So the mafia is very much real today. Also, there are other mafias, such as the Russian mafia, as well as the Japanese mafia are really popular. Here's what I'll tell you about the mafia. Now, if you've ever seen The Godfather, or you've seen parodies of The Godfather, such as the Zootopia had a parody of The Godfather in there, of the icing and the little rat. That's actually a scene from The Godfather. The Godfather, though, is rated R, so please ask your parents' permission before going and watching it. But it's all about what the mafia does to you to get rid of you. And here's what I would say. Don't mess the mafia. If you ever think to yourself, I should mess with the mafia, I would say, don't do it. Reasons why you shouldn't do it is because, first off, they have weapons. Now, at this time period, they have the Tommy gun. Tommy gun is basically a handheld machine gun that you can be able to use, and it became very, very popular. It's part of the reason the FBI was created. The FBI was created to be able to combat this organized crime that was going on in America. And I added a slide, but it didn't get updated, so I'm going to pull it to you, because I wanted to talk about why you shouldn't get involved with the mafia. How's the mafia going to kill you if you're a problem? One of their most famous ways is what is called the cement shoe. And what the cement shoe was exactly like how it sounds. You have dishonored the family of the mafia. And they're not going to kill you quick. They start by tying you to a chair. Then they put your feet in a bucket where they pour cement in it. Cement takes 8 hours to harden. They leave you there for 8 hours as your feet harden to the cement. Then they take you out to a river in New York, the Hudson River. Then they throw you into the river, you sink to the bottom, and then you drown. This is called cement feet, okay? Now, the mafia can also kill you in other ways too. So, every couple of years, you'll hear of some mafia hit going on in New Jersey, especially, or New York City. All of a sudden, some Italian place will have all these people dead inside. Now, let's pretend that you go against the mafia. So, a couple of years ago, there was a guy that was hired by the FBI to be an informant. Now, when you join the mafia, there's a ritual that you perform. It's very symbolic. It's very family-oriented. This guy walked in with a tie that had a secret camera on it that filmed the initiation. He then handed it over to the FBI. 1 hour later, he was found dead, shot 35 times. Okay? Now, you don't mess with the mafia. And I want to give you an example that a student gave me a couple years ago. So this student had a brother that went on his mission to Italy. And in Italy, that's where like the big time mafia is. Now, when he was in Italy, he went and was tracting, and if you don't know what that is, that's like where they go out to find people to convert to the Mormon church. And they found this girl, and they were teaching this girl for a couple of months. And finally, this girl was like, yeah, I'd like to invite you guys over dinner. They're like, oh, yeah, cool, dinner, like that. They show up, and it turns out it's the head of the Italian mafia's house. That's his daughter. So they had been teaching the head of the Italian mafia's daughter for months and months and months. So they talked about how they showed up at this house and they went in and all these people had like AR-15s in their hands. And then they were being served by waiters who had like 7 guns on their gun belts. And this Italian mafia guy was just like the godfather and things like that. And they were sitting with this Italian mafia boss. And he was like, so how do you like Italy? Because both of them were new to the area. One of them had just barely arrived about 10 days earlier to Italy. And so they're like, well, it's good, but I had something really bad happen. And they're like, what do you mean something bad happened? And the new missionary said, well, when I got to this area of Italy, my bag was stolen off the train. And he's like, and it sucks because I had like my stuff in it and clothes in it and things like that. And he's like, wow, I'm so sorry that happened. He's like, yeah, it's all right, I'll pay for it. He's like, you know what, let me figure some stuff out and I'll make sure that you get some replacements for what you had. So they don't think anything of it. And they go off and do their tracking and stuff like that. A couple days later, the missionaries come home to their house, and the door is unlocked on their house. And they open up the door, and sitting on the bed is the original suitcase with everything inside of it, nothing missing, and 10 grand in cash. And a little note that said, we have your back. Now, they never found out how they got it. They asked the mafia boss what happened, and he's like, don't worry, we took care of it for you. And when I asked this brother, and no, you don't want to get into the mafia. No, you don't.
No, I want to be like on the edge where you're like helping them, but you're like,
no. Now, listen. Now, what I will tell you is I had a chance to speak with this mafia guy, and by the way, they did end up converting her, and she did convert to the Mormon church. She got baptized. And yeah, which is actually a big deal considering the fact that the mafia is very tied to like Catholic ties, so it's a really big deal. I will tell you that when I asked this guy, I said, why would the mafia do that, especially to Mormons who are trying to change you from that thing? I'll get to you in just a second. And I asked him that, and he said, so the mafia highly respects the Mormon church because of their commitment to their religion. And so they said that the mafia tends to help out the missionaries, and also in Japan, they do this similarly in Japan. They help out the missionaries because of their commitment to their religion. And they asked them what happened, and it basically got to the point where they just didn't ask. They took the $10,000, they donated it to charity, so they did not keep that money. But, yeah, so what were you going to say, Chase?
My mom had something kind of like this happen when she was in college. So she served her mission in Chicago. And there's some ties there, but she went to BYU, Idaho, like Rick's.
Yeah.
And so she went on a blind date, and they go to like this really fancy dinner, right? And he gets like a call. He's like, "Sorry, I have to go right now. Well, like I'll make it up to you and stuff." And so he goes, and they all like speed off in cars, and then a limo comes and picks him up and drives them home. And then the next day, he's like, sorry, I had to take care of some things for work. And he's like, I'll have a limo come pick you up, and you can go buy whatever you want. And he was like, she turned him down.
Yeah. I have two students that married into the Italian mafia. And I will tell you, you're going to be number 3. Great. That makes me feel so great. Here's what I will tell you about the mafia. I personally would not get involved with the mafia, okay? No, please. So you don't just join things, but you can't just show up and like. Well, let's go into why you don't want to mess with the mob. Okay? So let's talk about why you would care about the mob. Okay? Now, the mob, listen, the mob is the exact same thing as the mafia. The only difference is no Italian ties. So this would be similar to a modern day gang. Okay? So what happens though is that you have a lot of heads who are willing to do whatever they can to bootleg this alcohol. In particular, let me give you an example of Al Capone, most famously known as the nickname of what? No, totally different person.
Al Capone.
His name is Al Capone, but that's not his
And
nickname.
he's known as Al Capone.
He's known as Scarface. Scarface.
Say hello.
Okay, yes, that is true. Now, listen. So what I will tell you about Al Capone is Al Capone, though, was willing to do anything possible. So he was in charge of Chicago and the trade in Chicago of illegal alcohol. So this comes down to an event between him and Bugs Moran. This is basically west side, east side of Chicago. I think it was north side, south side, one of the two. Regardless. Okay. Well, let me tell you what happens. You see, Al Capone is sick of Bugs Moran and he wants to get rid of him. So he has somebody call up Bugs Moran and says, hey, I got a whole bunch of cheap liquor. Come get it. Bugs Moran is like, awesome, I love cheap liquor. And he and his buddies go to do it. Well, when they show up, unfortunately for them, the police catch them. So they go and they arrest them and they tell everybody, hey, hands up, get against the wall, we're going to go ahead and arrest you. All Bugs Moran men, as well as Bugs Moran himself, go up against the wall, and all of a sudden the police officers pull out their Tommy guns and kill them all in an execution. Now, when people walked out, they thought the police were responding to the massacre. They end up basically taking the bodies, they end up putting them into the police van, there's an entire investigation, they drive off, and who is the actual policeman? All of Al Capone's men. So it was an entire setup. Now, this is what is known as the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. And what happens if you have a mobster that does stuff like this? Now, Al Capone never gets arrested to the assumed 600 crimes that he committed. He is currently, right now, I believe the list is 627 known links to murders around the United States. But that is not why he goes to jail. Anybody know why he goes to jail?
Tax evasion.
Tax evasion. He gets it for tax fraud for not putting it in correctly. And he goes to a place called Alcatraz. Now, Alcatraz is right outside of San Francisco. It's a great place to be able to go to. It is considered the most secure facility at the time in the world. And the reason why it was a giant island. And if you know anything about San Francisco, you know that the currents drive you out to the ocean. So there are only 3 known escape attempts of people who actually got off the island. Well, the thing is, nobody technically has ever escaped. Or did they? Gasp, conspiracy. So, it all centers around these 3 men. Now, 2 of these men are brothers, and then you have a third man as well. They are known as the famous escape from Alcatraz. So the other 2 escapes, one was attempting, one like snuck into the laundry and snuck across the boat. They were found. Another one got caught up in some barbed wire. But these guys, they did not know they escaped until the next morning. Now, what they did is they basically collected, one of them was the hairdressers, they collected hair and created these paper mache heads. They then put it into the bed, and then over time, they took spoons from the commissary, took out the little grate for the air, and they dug holes behind that grate. They escaped up through the pipe system. Now, their goal was to basically escape, get past or not past the Golden Gate Bridge, go north and hopefully be able to get out where Angel Island is, which is where, the immigration and stuff like that is. However, did they make it or not? Well, here's the evidence that says they did escape. So they found all of the heads out there. You might say, well, whoa. What's this head? There's 3 men, but there's 4 heads. Here's a great lesson in why you shouldn't procrastinate. Because there was actually originally 4 men, and they had a date a week later of when they were supposed to do this. Well, this guy procrastinated, saying, well, I got an extra week left, and they had to move it up because of a change in the guards, and he was too fat to get through his hole. He went to get through his hole, he got stuck, and he got stuck in his hole for the next 12 hours until somebody found him. So, this is why you don't procrastinate, especially in an escape attempt. Or just don't escape from prison, one of the two. Or just don't go to prison. That's a third option as well. So, they found these heads, and the only other 2 items that they have found a life vest as well as one of the paddles. Now, the thing is, did they escape or not? Well, the thing is, they have done this over and over again. Mythbusters has done it. Discovery Channel has done it. Everything points to the fact that it would have been almost impossible due to current conditions and the weather that night to have escaped. More than likely, the current would have drifted them out to the ocean and gone away. Or did they? About 20 years after the escape, family members of the 2 men received this letter from the 2 brothers that said they escaped successfully to Brazil. Now, handwriting experts 3 years ago for the History Channel did a documentary that said that this was confirmed to be their handwriting, and photo analysis said that this was their pictures. Now, according to the U.S. government, these 2 men are dead. They did not survive, and they are officially declared dead in the United States. Allegedly, though, they are currently living in Brazil as escaped inmates. So, it is up to you to think about if they did or not. Now, Alcatraz is not used anymore. So Alcatraz was used up until the 1970s, when eventually they basically decided that it was too much. I think it was 1960. They decided that there were better solutions. Alcatraz had also been very controversial, so they shut it down, and then it laid vacant actually for a long time. It was heavily vandalized. Homeless people lived there for a long time. We'll talk about that later in the civil rights movement and what happened at Alcatraz. And then starting in the 80s and the 90s, people started to say maybe we should do something about it. In the early 90s, they decided to create it as a national monument, and it's now one of the most visited places in all of San Francisco. And it is very, very cool to visit. Yes.
Escape. How can homeless people get there?
Okay, so when it's a jail, there's things called guards, and they go around to make sure nobody escapes.
Right, but those guys escaped.
Allegedly, okay. But when the homeless people and stuff like that started to occupy it, it was just a giant island that nobody was using. It would kind of be like, let's pretend that in the Great Salt Lake, there was some random little island. Nobody's going to monitor that. You take a little boat. You take a boat.
I thought the currents were whoosh out.
There are other types of boats other than a man-made boat that they allegedly made. According to the Jim Allen or whoever it was that stayed, he said how they planned this, and they made the raft from life jackets. So there are other types of boats, such as motor boats, that can get you across.
Well, those are plastic.
I know, but when you're trying to get there, you'll do what you need. Okay, last thing that could possibly be on your quiz that I want to focus on has to do with expanding gender roles. Now, 19th Amendment, you already know. Women started to gain more rights in World War I, and they've started to get those rights through voting and stuff like that. Women became more active in politics on and after World War I, and they become what are known as flappers. And if you will go ahead and star the flappers. Now, flappers, you need to highlight were fashionable, scandalous women that rebelled against gender norms. And the second bullet is the traditional thing about them. Now, I am warning you of the pictures I am about to show you. Flappers were extremely scandalous women. They were scantily clad. They were sexual. They were promiscuous. They were naughty. And in fact, they were so naughty that people made laws against them for how they dressed. So I'm about to show you some extremely inappropriate photos in school. I apologize for these photos. Okay? Well, all these photos were against the law at this time. So let's see what these women look like. Gasp!
Oh my God!
Look at those ankles. You can see their shoulders. Ready for this? It's getting worse. It's getting worse. Look at this. You can see their knees, and oh my goodness, you can see their arms. Oh, it's so scandalous. This woman, by the way, would be considered like the skankiest of the time period. This was extremely inappropriate. In fact, it was so inappropriate that men, as police officers, would go and measure women's skirts and swimsuits to see if they were legally allowed. And if they weren't, they would be arrested for promiscuity and sexuality and nudity in public. This, by the way, is too short. She would be arrested for what she was wearing as that swimsuit.